Now we get into what is it that sets people off. What I'd like to do is I'd like to do a brief exercise to help illustrate this very basic human process. This is going to feel a little odd, but I'm going to ask you to go through 2 reflections with your eyes closed in a moment when I give you the instruction, and then I will guide you through some thoughts about them with your eyes closed, and then I will tell you when you can open your eyes, and we'll begin to discuss some of the sensations that you were having. So I'd like you to get very comfortable in your seat right now. Sit back, don't be slouching. Move so your rear end's up against the back of your chair. Don't cross your arms or your legs. Get relaxed. And I'd like you to close your eyes. And as you close your eyes, I will guide you through the first reflection. For this first reflection, I would like you to think of one of your subordinates or a client or customer who's a real pain in the ass. Somebody who really aggravates you and frustrates you. Think about the last couple times you interacted with them. Remembering those interactions. What are they doing that you wish they wouldn't? What are they not doing that you wish they would? Keeping your eyes closed, reflect on a few of those moments. Keeping your eyes closed, I'd like you to reflect on how you were feeling during those memories, those reflections. What feelings were you having? What sensations might you have been having in different parts of your body? Keeping your eyes closed, I'd like to bring you into the second reflection. For this one, I'd like you to remember one of your children when they were 3 to 5 years old, or a niece or a nephew, or if you don't have any, a puppy when your dog was 5 months old, or the kitten when your cat was 5 months old. What was it like to play with them, to be with them? Remember a few of those moments. Keeping your eyes closed, I'd like you to be aware of any feelings you were having during the second reflections, any sensations in different parts of your body. Thank you. You can open your eyes. What I'd like you to do right now is to see if you can do an internal compare and contrast. This is an opportunity to practice a little bit of mindfulness. We were talking about why it was so important in the earlier module. What were you feeling in the first set of reflections that was different than the second? How might you have felt differently in different parts of your body? Having done this with large numbers of other people before, I could say that most people, most of us, report on the first one feeling a bit tense. We're angry at the person and we describe it with hand motions like this. We feel we either clench our teeth or maybe we pull our shoulder blades in together and feel some tension in our neck. Sometimes we're frowning. Other times we feel a knot in our stomach. We don't like being there. And sometimes people say, well, I started to think about why the person does it. I needed to analyze it to get beyond how angry I was with the individual. In contrast, on the second one, as I'm sure most of you had the experience, most people say, well, it felt much lighter. I went from being tense in the first one to being free in the second. It was almost a feeling of darkness versus light, heaviness versus lightness. In the second one, I was smiling, and many of you were. I could see through the cameras in your computers. But Many of you were smiling. You felt more relaxed. It felt warm. You felt like you wanted to continue. And even though I gave you exactly 30 seconds in each time, from the time I started speaking to the time I returned, a lot of you felt like the first one was much longer, and you wanted the second one to last longer. These two sets of reactions are two parts of the autonomic nervous system in the human organism. The culprit, the thing that leads most people who are smart, intelligent, and thoughtful to be less effective in their relationships, is the buildup of the effect of chronic stress. Now, we need stress. We need stress to wake up in the morning. We need stress to defend ourselves. We need stress to build up our resilience. But the buildup of chronic, annoying stress is disastrous. Now, I don't mean acute stress, pull your hair out stress. I'm talking about annoying stuff. Somebody cuts you off in traffic. Your cell phone drops a call. Your computer doesn't boot up. That kind of annoying stress. The people who study this say we have 8 to 12 of those as adults in professional executive roles on a good day. Meanwhile, our bodies were not designed for it. Most men in professional roles have 5 or 6 days of this. Professional women have 7 days of this, because no sooner do you get home for a weekend or part of a weekend or a day off when you've got family or the larger male child to worry about or parents. But the fact is that our bodies are not designed for this load. It's called, actually, by the scientists who study it, allostatic load, strain. What happens when a moment of stress activates? Well, you probably had one this morning when you were first waking up. You know, the clouds are starting to drift out of your head, and you're starting to get a little conscious, and you pulled back the sheets, and you rolled over in bed. What was the first thought that came to you? Oh my God, a beautiful day here. Probably not. You probably thought, oh, I have to do that thing at work. I have to take the car to the mechanic. What am I going to do about that email that really annoyed me last night? We often activate the human organism when we wake up to prepare for our to-do list, but it's not a positive to-do list. Usually it's a negative. Joseph Ledoux has shown that when we start to get some basic data from our 5 senses into our brain, it hits our thalamus, and in 8 milliseconds, it hits the amygdala. The amygdala goes into an alarm. Watch out. It takes about 40 milliseconds to get to the other parts of your neocortex to frame actual what might become later conscious thought or an observation, perception. But during that process, your body activates what's called the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, the sympathetic nervous system. This is the body's fight or flight response. Among other things, as a part of this, your body starts to secrete 3 endocrines, in particular epinephrine, norepinephrine, and cortisol. Now, epinephrine and norepinephrine are both hormones and neurotransmitters. And one of their jobs is, in these kind of dosage levels, to be vasoconstrictors. So it's said that our blood travels about 7.5 miles in our bodies. When this clicks in, it knocks off what some people estimate to be about a mile. So if you remember simple physics, you have an amount of fluid in a fixed tube and you cut a bunch of it off, the pressure goes up. So as your blood pressure goes up, your pulse rate goes up, your breathing starts to get more shallow. Epinephrine is pulling blood from your capillaries, your fingertips, nose, ears, and extremities to go to the large muscle groups in the arms so you could fight. Norepinephrine to go to your large muscle groups in your legs so you could run if you have to. But in the process, what most people don't appreciate is also pulling blood from capillaries in your brain. The net effect is that when you're under this buildup of chronic, annoying stress, you don't have access to all of your neural networks. On top of that, cortisol, a whole set of corticosteroids are going into your bloodstream, CRH, CRF, ACTH, eventually cortisol. We need cortisol. It's the body's natural anti-inflammatory. If you're about to get hit or bitten, your body will say, hey, keep going. And it also helps convert fat cells to glucose so you could use them for energy. But cortisol has 2 nasty effects on the human body. First, it relatively turns off your immune system. Within 8 to 12 minutes of the onset of these annoying episodes of stress, your immunoglobulin A and your natural killer T cells are significantly lower than they were before, which means you are very vulnerable to all the disease organisms around. The second nasty effect is basically the fact that it inhibits to the point of almost stopping neurogenesis. Neurogenesis is the growth of new neural tissue. We know that fetuses do it, infants do it, children do it, even teenagers, despite reason or observations, are still having their brains grow dramatically. Adults can continue to build new neural tissue throughout our adult life. When Peter Eriksson and his colleagues at the University of Sweden published this first study on adult human neurogenesis in 1998, I've got to say, for those of us who were at college in the 60s, this was very reassuring news. But for all of us, what it means is that when we're under this chronic deluge of stress, which most of us are in professional managerial positions, we are not only aren't we on top of our game, but we're actually under a degree of cognitive, perceptual, and emotional impairment. For example, most of us have 180 to 270 degree peripheral vision. Under this onslaught of chronic stress, with occasional doses of acute stress, it goes down to 30 degrees. Other studies have shown the same thing happening when you're exposed to people. You are closed to people who you may not know, or people who are different than you are. The same thing happens when you consider new ideas. Under this chronic stress, you're much likely to have your first reaction to be reject any new idea. Now, with all this going on and the fact that all these problems with our immune system being relatively dysfunctional at this point, what's happening is that's why people under a lot of this kind of chronic power stress have higher incidence of bacterial infection, influenza, type 2 diabetes, ulcers, at least 3 of the 87 categories of diagnostic categories of cancer that I've read about. And that because of the epinephrine, norepinephrine, you have a lot of problems with heart attacks, strokes, sleep disorders, gastrointestinal difficulties, and sexual dysfunctions. Welcome to leadership. The dilemma is, if all this were going on, how come you're not dead? Well, sometimes I joke around and say, well, maybe you are. Then you have to decide, is this your version of heaven or hell? But again, if we take it seriously, the reason you're not dead is the human body is designed to counteract this onslaught. And even though our bodies were not designed and are not designed to deal with the level of this onslaught we get in modern life, we still bounce back. That is through the function of the parasympathetic nervous system. And this is a neural, hormonal, endocrine activation that allows us to rebuild the body. So in the first reflection, I'm assuming as you felt tense, as you started to feel more kind of agitation, as you maybe your mind flitted around, you were annoyed. And in that sensation, you weren't really on top of things. In the second one, people very often slowed down. Their breathing got deeper. They felt warmer. They felt more relaxed. The tensions flowed away. That was the action of the parasympathetic nervous system. Notice when I said think of one of your children when they were 3 to 5, I didn't say when they were 15. And the only time this exercise doesn't work well is if you currently have 3 to 5-year-olds, because then the experience is not as nice as the nostalgia of those moments when they were that adorable. But the parasympathetic nervous system literally, quite literally, does the opposite to the sympathetic nervous system. You start to see a baby smile. You start to see a puppy rolling around in the grass or a kitten batting a ball, and you smile. What happens is you start to activate a different network at the same speeds as the other one. This one goes through, as all do, your amygdala, but it often hits the orbital frontal cortex, part of the nucleus accumbens. Very often you're getting a stimulation of the vagus nerve. And then as this circuit starts to hit other parts of your brain, a different set of hormones are being secreted into your bloodstream, primarily oxytocin in women and primarily vasopressin in men. These are vasodilators at these levels of dosage. That means that they do the opposite to what epinephrine, norepinephrine does. So what they're doing is opening up the blood vessels. So you start to feel warmer in your extremities. Your blood pressure is going down. Your pulse rate's going down. You start to breathe more deeply. And in the process, you feel more lifted, more elated. It is in this arena of the parasympathetic nervous system that your body can renew itself. It is in this arena of arousal and activation that you are at your cognitive best. According to the research studies, and many of them, you can do the most complex activities, you are the most creative, you are the most open to understanding individuals, even though they look very different than you are. And on every measure done, you are at a better state, perceptually, cognitively, emotionally, and your immune system is kicking in. So at whatever, some of us have immunosuppressive disorders, but at whatever level your immune system can function, it's functioning at its best in this parasympathetic renewal state. It is in this renewal state that neurogenesis is occurring. It is in this state that you start to feel amused, joyful, not necessarily happy. Happy is a little bit of an odd emotion. It doesn't always associate with parasympathetic nervous system.